In this video, all I'm going to do is point out some gap plays to the upside. The first stock is Oracle. This gap here begins right at the baseline, the middle of the trend at roughly 104.89, closes out at roughly 114.90. The next one is Johnson Controls International. We've got a gap to the north side at roughly 55.25, closes out at roughly 56.60. Ignore the yellow lines. Those are previous support and resistance lines from days ago. Now, the next one is EBIX. We've got a gap that begins right here at 488 and closes out at roughly 497. I have been in this trade previously, and the last time I dabbled, I got out at a return of 29%. I will not be buying in again until we hit at least -2 standard deviations. The next one is MRNA. There's a gap to the upside starting at roughly 81.31, closes out at roughly 81.94, and of course, many levels in between before we close this out. The next one is ENPH. The gap begins at roughly 102.78, closes out at nearly 4 standard deviations, and that is 103.48. OXY. The gap begins at roughly 56.68, closes out at roughly 57.05. But to the south side, we could get to 53.89. The next one is DVN. There's a gap to the upside at roughly 43.81 and 44.42. And if we close this out, just be careful because it is close to resistance. And when we hit this area, in general, people do tend to take their profits and then the price falls back down again. And note this gap closed to the downside at 43.48. So we went from here, gapped down, closed out this gap that formed on the 8th. So no longer in play. The next one is CTVA. We've got a gap that begins at roughly 45.51, closes out at roughly 45.78. Note the bounce near support here, sell off. This is resistance. This is resistance as well. And the bounce closer to support, and I anticipate a bounce here to close out this gap. VLO. This gap closes to the upside at roughly 122.46, closes out at roughly 123.29. Another gap to the upside beginning at roughly 124.56. And this one at 125.53. I don't think this will close out on Wednesday. It'll take a while, I think, for that one to be done. Looking left, this gap closed out at 122.13, so no longer in play. It formed on Friday the 8th as well. And note, if we are up here, this turns into support along this line, fell through, went back up, fell back down, and then hit resistance and started to grind sideways and then back down again to repeat the process. Charter does not have one, but it did close out this one at 367.52. And looking left, note the sell-off here at resistance. Bounce at support, support, sell-off at resistance along here, and then grinding down. The next one is CI, the Cigna Group. Again, thank you to Marat for pointing this one out previously. We have a gap to the south side that closes out at 258.96. So watch out for that. We gapped up on the 8th. What goes up must come down. What goes down doesn't necessarily get back up again. But just watch out for this one to the south side. Airbnb, a gap. We've started to fill it and have not closed it out, but it started at 139.74, closes out at 142.91. And there are some landmines to the south as well. This one closes out at 133.71. We are not in that channel. And finally, XOM. This one closed out at 98.46. This one closed out at 99.17, fell down to support, bounced back up again. And I'll just do one more and see if this one has any gaps. Nope. At least not any near-term ones. Of course, you'll want to go to the daily, the weekly, the monthly to see the big picture gaps. But actually, right here, I look for gaps and I could just spot them a mile away. Now, these little gaps obviously will be taken out when we get down to -2, -3, -4 standard deviations as well. So the little ones, I don't really pay attention to that much. The bigger ones, the obvious ones, I like to look for and play as well. But if you like to go short, look for your gaps that go to the downside. Obviously, it could take a while to get there. So don't hold your breath. That'll happen one day. So this gap will close to the downside at, turn off my magnet, 56.96. And if we hit that, it could go down just a little bit more and then bounce back up because this is support. All right, that does it for me. Thank you so much for watching.